Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto snaps at Kakashi Chunin exams part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please like my video and subscribe to my channel for more fanfics like this. And now let's start the fanfic. In a moderately sized room located in the Hokage Tower, a council meeting began. The clan heads and civilian representatives were both present and waited until 3 final members arrived. Somber mood could be felt in the room, its occupants still saddened by the loss of their leader. Soon the door opened and 3 figures entered. Mitokado Homura and Udatane Kaharu were the first to enter. Both were old veterans, serving with Sarutobi during the war. Their features were schooled and their postures commanding. Having been the main contributors to many village matters, they considered themselves very important assets of the village. Only the civilian side of the council showed them respect, however, since the clan heads often found their actions unreasonable and unnecessary. Behind them, Danzo entered. He carried himself proudly, no emotion shone on his aged face. There was begrudging respect from the clan heads for the man as he was very powerful and held Konoha's safety above anything else. That's where the respect ended because many were against his methods and especially the root program. The 3 took their seats and looked over the room's occupants. Seeing that every council member was present, Mitokado Homura stood up. "Let us begin the meeting," he began, shuffling papers in his hands. "There will only be one topic today. We are going to choose the godmother." Everyone stiffened but no one said anything. Not everyone wanted to go through with this so fast after Sarutobi's passing, yet they knew that it was necessary. Having a village without a leader at a crucial time like this could lead the village to its doom. "We have already asked Jiraiya but he declined and set out to find any rumors of an attack from our enemies," Homura continued. Jiraiya, however, nominated Tsunade for the position. Nara Shikaku nodded from his seat. That would be an acceptable choice. Tsunade-sama is a powerful and respected kunoichi trained by Sarutobi-sama himself. There were several more nods of agreement but a strong, commanding voice decided to interrupt. "I disagree with that decision," Danzo began from his seat. "Tsunade hasn't been seen for over 15 years and she spends her days drinking and gambling her inheritance away. If anything, she should be marked as a nukenin. She is not suitable to lead the village." Clan heads frowned, wondering where he was going with this. Their frowns deepened as they saw several civilians nod in agreement. Homura and Kaharu also looked like they agreed with the man. "Who would you suggest then, Danzo-sama?" a civilian asked. Danzo stood up. "I nominate myself for the position of the godmother Hokage." No one seemed surprised at that. It was a common knowledge to anyone who knew Danzo that the man wanted the Hokage position for years. After the Kyuubi attack, he failed in his endeavor because Sarutobi was alive but now there was no one to prevent him. The civilians, along with Homura and Kaharu, were all in favor of the idea and the clan heads couldn't do much. Even if they rebelled against the decision, it would only endanger the village in the long run. "Very well then," Homura said with finality. "As of today, the godmother Hokage is Shimura Danzo." Danzo stood up, barely concealing his smirk and bowed slightly to the others in the room. The civilians read it as a sign of thanks but the clan heads knew what he meant. He was finally in charge. Straightening himself, Danzo addressed the room. "The meeting is adjourned. Tomorrow morning we will meet again to discuss further problems." People began to file out of the room silently, some nodding to Danzo while some ignored him. Now left alone with the 2 elderly council members, Danzo motioned to follow him to his new office. The 2 walked behind him quietly and they reached the office within minutes. Sitting himself in the Hokage's chair with a smug expression on his face, Danzo looked at the 2 members. "Send someone to collect the genin who participated in the exams," he said. The 2 nodded and left in a hurry, leaving Danzo alone to revel in his victory. His victorious smirk didn't leave his face for hours. 4x. Naruto awoke with a groan hearing the louder than normal knocks on his door. Tiredly, He sat up and swung his legs off the bed before shaking his head, his long hair flaying wildly. He stopped and yawned before standing up and slowly walked to the door. Opening it, he came face to face with a cute brown-haired girl wearing a standard Konoha uniform with a Chunin flak jacket who blushed brightly the moment she saw him. He looked at her in confusion before he realized he was only wearing boxers and he chuckled lightly. Hey what can I do for you? He asked, scratching his cheek. Regaining her composure, the girl gave him a small smile. Hokage-sama has requested your presence. Hokage. Is this some kind of joke? He asked with an angry frown. The kunoichi shook her head. It is not a joke, Uzumaki-san. Shimura Danzo was elected as the godmother this morning. They announced it to the village 2 hours ago. Still frowning, he realized that he slept in pretty late to miss the announcement. Nodding to the kunoichi, she smiled and left while he closed the door and went to get dressed. As he put his clothes on, he mulled over the information he received. Danzo is the Hokage. Sarutobi was probably turning in his grave. Finally dressed, he looked himself over. He was wearing a black sleeveless shirt with a face mask attached, black pants and black knee-high shinobi sandals. A pair of Anbu-style fingerless gloves donned his hands. A dark red sash was wrapped around his waist. His forehead protector was wrapped around his forehead and he tied his hair into a ponytail, leaving 2 bangs to frame his face. Strapping his pouches, he nodded to himself and walked out of his apartment. As he jumped over the rooftops, he glanced down at the streets. When he left the hospital to buy himself some new clothes, he received many looks of respect from the general populace. He was greatly surprised when the shopkeeper greeted him warmly and even helped him pick out his new clothes. Apparently saving the village from a giant demon would change their opinions of you. It didn't take him long to reach the Hokage Tower and he swiftly walked the steps to the office. Knocking on the sturdy door, he waited until he heard the call and entered. Inside, he found several more people other than the newly appointed Hokage. Kakashi, Kurenai, Guy and Asuma stood with Sasuke, Shino, Neji and Shikamaru in front of them. He had a general idea of why he was here, so he took a spot next to Sasuke, who shot him a hateful glare, and waited. Danzo looked over each genin before nodding. First off, congratulations for reaching the 3rd exam, he said with a fake voice of praise. My advisors and I have evaluated your performances and decided on the promotions. 5 genin stood on attention, waiting for the results. Only 2 of you were found worthy of the promotion. Nara Shikamaru, congratulations on the promotion. The genin in question looked shocked for a moment before nodding. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Normally, he would complain, but Danzo scared the hell out of him. He walked to the desk where Danzo sat and bowed before moving back before his sensei. Danzo's eyes scrutinized the other 4 genin before locking on one of them. Next, Uzumaki Naruto. Congratulations on your promotion. If Naruto was surprised, he didn't show it. He walked up to the desk and bowed. Thank you, Hokage-sama. Looking back at Danzo's face, he saw a strange glint in the man's eyes, but he ignored it for now and moved back to stand in front of Kakashi, ignoring Sasuke's fuming expression. Danzo looked once more at all of them. Dismissed, he said in a commanding tone, and with small bows, the shinobi left the room. As soon as the door closed behind them, Sasuke bolted away, leaving them all behind. Kakashi sighed at his students' behavior before looking at the others with his usual smile. Wanna grab a bite to eat to celebrate the promotions of our 2 new Chunin? Wouldn't you want to do that with your team? Kurenai asked with a confused expression. Well, you've seen Sasuke. He motioned at the empty hallway where the boy was only a few moments ago. I can ask Sakura to come though. Still, the more the merrier, he finished with a smile. Asuma nodded. Sure, I'll grab Choji and Ino and we can go, he said smiling. Excellent, Kakashi said happily before looking at the 2 other Jonin. What about you guys? Some other time, Kakashi, Guy replied. Neji and I are going to visit Lee in the hospital. Kakashi nodded and looked at Kurenai, who shrugged. I don't see why not. I'll find Kiba and Hinata and see if they want to go as well, she said with a small smile. Excellent, Kakashi exclaimed. Let's meet at that new barbecue place in half an hour then. The other Jonin nodded and they all began to leave. As they watched them leave, Naruto and Shikamaru though stood silently in their place. They didn't even ask our opinion, Naruto flatly pointed out. Shikamaru sighed in reply. Troublesome. 4x. 30 minutes later, 6 genin, 2 chunin and 3 jonin occupied a private booth at the restaurant. They placed their orders and sat down, 2 newly promoted chunin being the center of attention. Shikamaru grabbed himself a chunin flak jacket on the way out of the tower while Naruto chose not to wear it. He simply didn't need it. I can't believe you two of all people became chunin, Ino said in disbelief as she rested her head in her palm. Not like we asked them to promote us, Shikamaru grumbled in reply. It's going to be even more troublesome from now on. Asuma laughed next to his student and patted his shoulder before lighting a cigarette. Come on, it's not that different from being a genin. Just make sure you don't slack off or you'll end up guarding the gate. For a lazy like him it would be a perfect job, Naruto said with a snort and, much to everyone's surprise, lit his own cigarette. Exhaling the first satisfying smoke, he looked at the stunned people around him and put his pack of cigarettes back in his pouch. What? Naruto, you smoke? Kakashi asked, his voice full of surprise. At Naruto's nod, he blinked. Since when? Since I was 7, Naruto replied matter-of-factly. Why? 7. Why didn't I know about it? Kakashi asked, still shocked. Because I never smoked in front of you, Naruto replied with a shrug. Why would I even tell you? You'd just take away my cigarettes. And I can't take them away now. Kakashi asked with a raised brow. You can try, the blonde replied with a smirk. The next moment saw Kakashi tossing Naruto's pack in the air with one hand, smiling victoriously. As he looked at Naruto expecting a look of shock, he didn't expect the boy to hold a copy of Ika Ika, Paradise in his hand. Mouth open in shock, Kakashi simply pointed at the book making Naruto smirk. Remember, you didn't take away my lighter, the blonde said in a sing-song voice. Kakashi's eyes widened at the implication and he quickly tossed the pack back to Naruto who laughed and put the pack in his pouch but didn't return the book. My book, Kakashi said edgily while extending his hand. Hang on, the blonde said as he opened the first page of the book. I want to see what's so special about this book. Then he began to read. And didn't stop. Others gaped at the sight of Uzumaki Naruto reading a book. His eyes darted left and right along the pages so fast that the Uchihas would be stunned. His cigarette was burning out in his hand as he was fully immersed in the book. Finally stopping after he read the entire first chapter in mere minutes, Naruto looked at Kakashi with a strange glint in his eyes. This is amazing, he breathed out dreamily. The plot, the characters, the smut, they feel so real. Kakashi had the same glint in his eyes as he locked eyes with his student. It is, isn't it? Many don't see the perfection that is Ika Ika. They're idiots, Naruto replied. This is gold. Perverts, Kurenai said while pinching the bridge of her nose. The two turned to look at her. All men are perverts, Kurenai-sensei, Naruto said. Some are just too afraid to show it, Kakashi finished. The red-eyed beauty looked at them blankly. Their food then arrived and the conversation topic changed. They chatted about this and that, joked around. The girls talked to Hinata mostly after she woke up from passing out after hearing that her Naruto-kun was no longer innocent. Several hours passed in a flash and soon they began to leave as the sun began to set. With final goodbyes, everyone went their own way. 4x. Next morning saw Naruto standing before Danzo. He was quite surprised when an Anbu member woke him up saying the Hokage requested his presence. He didn't know what Danzo had in store for him so he quietly stood under scrutiny of Danzo's only visible eye. Uzumaki, I have a mission for you, Danzo said in a commanding voice. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. A solo mission? He asked in confusion. But I'm only a fresh Chunin. Wouldn't I have to take missions with a team? Normally, that would be the correct procedure, Danzo began as he clasped his hands together. But this is a delicate mission for only one man and I have full trust in you to complete it. Naruto didn't believe Danzo's praising tone for a moment, but he didn't really have a choice. Very well, what is the mission? We have received information that group of enemy shinobi made camp few miles north of Konoha. Your mission is to scout the area and, if you feel you can, take out the enemy, Danzo relayed to the blonde. The primary mission is simple scouting and a team would only slow you down if you needed to run. If you need more information, read this scroll, he finished and tossed a scroll at the Bond who deftly caught it. Naruto opened the scroll which contained the location of the possible enemy camp and skimmed through the contents before rolling it up and placing it in his pouch. I'll leave immediately then. Danzo nodded stiffly. Dismissed. With that, the blonde turned around and left the office. No sooner than he left, a single figure dropped from the shadows, getting on one knee in front of the desk. Are you sure this will work, Danzo-sama? The man asked without emotion. No, Danzo replied. I can only hope it will. Fu, take Torun and prepare for Plan B, just in case it does fail. As you wish, Danzo-sama, the now revealed Fu said before disappearing again. Danzo was left alone again, hoping his plan would bear fruit. 4x. Naruto jumped through the trees as he traveled towards the possible enemy location. The map pointed at an old monk temple that was abandoned a long time ago and was left to rot. Barely anyone knew it even existed, so it was a perfect spot for an enemy camp to spawn. Slowing his jumps as he neared the temple, Naruto stealthily dropped to the ground and skulked through the last line of trees. Peeking out, he spotted the temple, or what remained of it. It was more of a ruin than a temple, as many parts were caved in and the surrounding trees began to cover the still standing walls. What bothered him, though, was that it was strangely quiet. He expected at least some signs of enemy activity, but nothing showed. It looked like no one was here in decades. Sneaking around, he spotted an opening in the side of the temple and moved towards it. Getting directly beneath it, he jumped and latched onto the ledge before pulling himself up. Peeking out carefully, he looked around the moderately sized chamber. Whatever beauty of monks' creations was there before, laid in ruins now. Once beautiful statues, now were broken and scattered around, filling the room as debris. Apart from that, it was empty. No signs of activity whatsoever. Was Danzo's information wrong? Jumping down in the chamber, he quietly walked around, trying to spot anything. He didn't see anything, however, and stood up with a sigh. Turning around, he took a first step towards the broken doors of the temple, but a slow clapping froze him in place. Turning around a split second later with a kunai in his hand, his eyes landed on a familiar man with silver hair and a pair of round glasses on his face. Hello, Naruto-kun, the man said with a smile. I'm glad to see you again. You certainly look different. Kabuto, Naruto snarled in response, his grip on the kunai tightening. I certainly didn't expect to see your traitorous face anytime soon. The man only laughed. Me neither, trust me. But an interesting request came to my master and we didn't have heart to reject it, he finished with a cold smirk. What request? Naruto asked edgily. He didn't think for a second that Kabuto was here alone, but he dreaded of who was accompanied him. Oh, I would love to tell you, Kabuto smirked. But I think my master would love to be the one to do it. Naruto's blood run cold as another familiar figure began to rise from the ground. Black hair, white skin and yellow slitted eyes that belonged to only one man. No, to a monster. Orochimaru stood in his full, disgusting glory, smirking down at the blonde. Even with his arms looking dead, he was still as terrifying as he was back in the forest of death. Naruto gulped and raised his kunai slightly, feeling that his chances of escape were practically non-existent. Hello, Naruto-kun, Orochimaru began with a sinister chuckle. It warms me to see you again. Naruto said nothing as he stared at the bigger threat of the two. He knew he couldn't defeat him even in his weakened state. The man was simply too powerful for him to do anything. And with Kabuto here, Naruto was sure he wouldn't be leaving this place alive. Ku, Orochimaru chuckled. Staying quiet, I see. No matter. I'm here to speak anyway, he said in a mocking tone. I'm sure you're wondering why we're here. Well, our old friend Danzo wanted us to pay you a visit. Naruto's eyes widened, but before jumping to conclusions, he fished for more information. Explain, he said with a threatening voice which only made Orochimaru chuckle more. I don't know if you were aware, but Danzo was after you from the moment the Kyuubi was sealed inside you. He always wanted you under his thumb, a perfect weapon at his disposal, Orochimaru began, smirking at the unease in Naruto's eyes. However, Sarutobi-sensei made sure that his old fingers never wrap around you. But with him dead, Danzo wants you. And that's where we come in. Naruto was now feeling even more uneasy. Danzo was behind this. And he wanted him, as a weapon. What is your purpose then? Danzo is the Hokage now, so I'm under his command by default. But old Danzo wants his weapons emotionless, without free will and ready to follow any order, be it moral or immoral, Orochimaru replied with an evil smirk. And we both know you wouldn't kill kids, even if you were ordered to. So we are here to wipe your mind clean and bring you back to him so he could mold you to his wishes. Naruto was growing more uneasy with each word that came from Orochimaru's mouth. You know I'm not going down without a fight? He asked, trying to sound stronger than he felt, but his tone betrayed him. Oh, I know, Orochimaru replied with a smirk. That's why Kabuto is here. I decided to let him have some fun with you before he brings you to me. The blonde's eyes widened slightly, which the snake man noticed. You didn't think I would be interested in you enough to stay here. Ku, I'll see you in a bit, Naruto-kun. With a final round of menacing chuckles, Orochimaru sunk into the ground, disappearing from the scene. Two remaining ninja watched each other, one with a calculating look, other with a condescending smirk. Shall we begin? Kabuto asked. Without a word, Naruto charged at the man, his kunai ready. Kabuto smirked and pushed the glasses up his nose and pulled out his own kunai before charging as well. The two met in the middle of the chamber, their blades clashing. Naruto glared at the man with a newfound resolution. Now that Orochimaru was out of the picture, he had a much bigger chance to leave this place alive. He had to give it his all and go in with the intent to kill. Without wasting a moment, he pushed the Kabuto's kunai and swung his left fist towards his stomach. Kabuto easily blocked it, but he was unprepared when Naruto suddenly spun around and threw a kick at him. Raising his arms, Kabuto blocked the kick with his forearms but was still knocked back by the strength of the kick. You have gotten stronger, Naruto-kun, Kabuto said as he flexed his arm muscles. The kick was strong and it even hurt slightly. But it won't be enough. We'll see about that, Naruto growled and charged again. Kunai met with a clang and the two continued their deadly fight. With each punch that hit home, a kick was the answer. They seemed equal in power and skill as neither could gain edge on the other. Kabuto was smirking all the way, like he was only playing with the blonde. As Naruto threw a kick, Kabuto's smirk widened and his hand swiped Naruto's thigh. The blonde winced in pain and jumped back holding his thigh. What the hell? He asked as he watched Kabuto's now glowing hand. He could already feel the injury in his leg heal, but seeing no sign of damage on his leg worried him. Chikura no Mesu, Kabuto answered. With this technique, I can cut up your insides with ease. I wonder how your advanced healing will respond to this. Naruto growled and jumped back, already going through hand seals. Raiden. Jion. A beam of lightning flew out of his mouth, heading towards Kabuto, but the man avoided it and charged at the blonde again. Naruto quickly leaned back, enough to avoid Kabuto's chakra scalpel going for his neck. If that hit, he would most likely lose because even the Kyuubi couldn't heal a cut windpipe fast enough. Kabuto was fighting fiercely, sending Naruto on the defensive. The blonde didn't have any means to defend himself from the scalpels other than dodging, and any counterattack was rendered useless. Each time he tried to fight back, Kabuto would swing his other hand towards Naruto's vital spot, this sending him back on defense. With that strategy, Kabuto managed to land several blows on Naruto. The blonde was lucky that only his arms and legs were cut because those were the easiest to heal. Several times, he had to let his arms or legs be cut so he could defend a vital spot, but the attacks were wearing him out. Kabuto feigned a swipe towards Naruto's head and the blonde raised his arms to block. Kabuto smirked as the blonde fell for the trap and kicked him hard in the stomach. Naruto staggered back with an arm on his stomach. Kabuto didn't let him recover as he charged and cut along Naruto's left forearm. The blonde grunted in pain and jumped back to gain some distance. Kabuto led him. "You are still too weak, Naruto-kun," the bespectacled man goaded. "Why not surrender and come peacefully?" "Never," Naruto growled. He had to finish this fast or he would lose. Kabuto could use his chakra scalpels to slowly cut him up and wear him down. A plan was forming in his head, risky but doable. Naruto charged again as he began going through hand seals. Kabuto smirked and charged as well, his glowing hands prepared. They met in the middle and Kabuto's hands sliced along Naruto's stomach, cutting up his insides. The blonde spat blood but didn't stop and raised his wind-encased hand, slamming it straight through Kabuto's neck. Kabuto's eyes widened and his mouth opened in a soundless scream as he felt unimaginable pain. His arms fell limply to his sides as his body practically hanged on Naruto's arm. He gazed at the blonde with disbelief, realizing now that the opening was intentional. If he could, he would curse, but he could do nothing but watch as life slowly drained from his eyes. Naruto lowered his arm, letting now dead Kabuto slide off it. The body hit the ground with a thud and the blonde staggered back. With the rush of the battle over, he could fully feel the pain in his body. He didn't know the extent of the damage Kabuto dealt him, but he was sure it wouldn't heal any time soon. Gathering the last ounce of his strength, Naruto ran out of the temple, moving as fast as he could. He had to escape while he had the chance. 4x. Danzo frowned as he read the small note that a snake brought him. Kabuto has failed and Naruto probably knew that he was behind this. He had to act fast if he ever hoped to have the blonde under his thumb. He waved his hand and an Anbu appeared before him. "Gather the Jonin for a meeting," he commanded, and the Anbu ninja disappeared to send a signal for the Jonin. Waving again, another Anbu appeared. Danzo nodded silently and the ninja disappeared with a bow. Standing up, he began walking towards the meeting room. It was time for Plan B. Few minutes later he opened the door of the meeting room and entered. Standing before every Jonin in Konoha, Danzo cleared his throat and began. "We have recently found evidence that Orochimaru had one more inside man in Konoha," he began, and the Jonin stiffened. They all knew that Kabuto was a traitor, but no one thought there was another. "The traitor is Uzumaki Naruto." Whole room gasped in shock. Angry shouting began the next moment as those who still doubted the blonde started to call for his execution. Danzo yelled for them to shut up and they did, albeit reluctantly. Are you sure about that, Hokage-sama?" a shocked Kakashi asked. He couldn't believe that his student was a traitor. He wouldn't believe it. Naruto was always loyal to the village and his friends. He could never betray them. "We have been suspicious for a while," Danzo began. "I sent Anbu to search his apartment and they found several scrolls signifying Uzumaki's connection to Orochimaru. There were also notes on Konoha's defenses and patrol routes, as well as a note of a meeting taking place today. Uzumaki left on a mission this morning, probably as a cover to meet with Orochimaru." Kakashi stood silent in shock as he processed this information. Several other Jonin also couldn't believe what they were hearing. They all looked at Danzo, hoping it was a joke, but they knew the man enough to know that he never joked. "You are to leave at once and find him. Bring him alive, Danzo finished. Seconds later, the room emptied as the Jonin began their assignment. Danzo was left smirking to himself. This plan would surely work. Naruto finally stopped after running for several hours. He was weak and tired and dropped on the ground as soon as he stopped. His insides still didn't heal completely and the pain was still there. Wheezing slightly, he looked around to see if he had anyone on his trail but could spot no one. Sighing in relief, he let his head drop. He had no idea what he should do now or where he should go. He was sure Danzo would do something to him as soon as he returned to the village, and in his weakened state, he couldn't do anything to prevent it. He had to rest and heal before he could do anything. He was sure he would pass out any moment now. He cursed as he knew how risky it would be and how anyone could find him here, but he could do nothing as his eyes began to drop. A ruffle of leaves grabbed his attention and he heard someone the moment before he passed out. Kakashi sighed as he entered the village. He was out in the woods looking for his student, yet there was no trace of him. Even with his tracking dogs, he couldn't find him. Looking up to the sky with his single, tired eye, he cursed to himself. He couldn't help but blame himself for Naruto's current predicament. Since no one knew where Naruto was for the month before the third exam, many assumed that he was with Orochimaru. He didn't believe any of that for a second, but his opinion hardly mattered at the moment. There was no need to report to Danzo now, so he made his way towards Training Ground 7. Expecting some free time of staring at the monument, he was surprised to see the familiar pink-haired girl running towards him, followed by her black-haired teammate. Kakashi-sensei, is it true what they say? She asked with trepidation lacing her voice. Is it true that Naruto is a traitor? Kakashi sighed before smiling slightly, placing his hand on her shoulder. No, it's not true. I'm sure Naruto would never become a traitor, he finished, squeezing her shoulder reassuringly. The Dobi must have realized how pathetic he was and decided to run away, Sasuke said with a scoff while looking away from the two. It was then that he felt a harsh pain on his face and he found himself sprawled on the ground. A hard look covered Kakashi's face and in a flash he was standing over Sasuke's prone body with his arm outstretched. I've looked past your arrogant behavior for a while now, Kakashi began with a cold voice. I even stood up for you when we were late for the Chunin exams. I always tried to swerve you away from your arrogance, to make you see your fellow comrades as your equals. But even today you see them all beneath you. Well, let me tell you something. He lowered himself and looked directly into Sasuke's eyes. Naruto was always stronger than you. With his eyes wide in shock, Sasuke watched as Kakashi turned around and left the training ground, followed by Sakura. The words of his sensei struck him deep and for the first time, he didn't know how to feel. He wanted to be angry and shout, show that he was better than everyone. Yet, at the same time he felt revulsion and regret for his actions. He wanted to scream but he settled for an angry growl. With his jumbled thoughts, he turned around and left in a hurry. 4x. Orochimaru screamed in anger as he finished reading the scroll on his desk. Killing intent rolled off of him in waves, scaring anyone in near vicinity. It was even worse for the Sound Four who were kneeling only a few feet away. They almost passed out from the sheer amount the man was producing. Is everything alright, my lord? Sakin asked with a trembling voice. No, it's not alright. Orochimaru shouted angrily. First Kabuto died, then that Danzo won't give me the Uchiha. He screamed again and kicked his desk away. Fucking Uzumaki. Should we head out and collect the Uchiha, Orochimaru-sama? Kidomaru asked. No, Orochimaru replied, calming down slightly. Danzo will watch him like a hawk from now on. There is no chance to enter the village undetected now. He growled angrily as his eyes landed on the scroll. He was hoping that even though he didn't capture Naruto, Danzo would fulfill his end of the deal. But Danzo didn't give him Sasuke. And that pissed him off immensely. He lost his best underling in this failure of a deal and didn't even get anything in return. Now he couldn't even send his men to Konoha to capture the boy because Danzo would be there to stop them. His plans were crumbling to dust right before his eyes. What is the plan then, Orochimaru-sama? Sakin asked without a stutter, seeing his leader calm down a little. I need a new body, Orochimaru said without looking at him. Everything else is of no importance to me now. He didn't spare them another glance as he left the room. 4x. Naruto groaned as he woke up. His entire body was stiff and moving only induced pain. Relaxing, he realized that he didn't feel the hardness of the forest ground but the softness of a mattress. His body went shock still at the thought of being captured while unconscious. He didn't hear anything around him and dared himself to open his eyes. He was met by a wooden ceiling with. On his left was a wooden wall with a beautiful painting of a single sakura tree, and on his right a desk filled with makeup stuff and a mirror leaning on the wall, and a bookcase on its side. There was also a window by the bed that showed already darkening sky and a nightstand with a lamp, as well as 2 doors which led outside into the bathroom. Straining himself, he sat up and saw that he was only in his boxers. Looking around, he tried to find his gear. Luckily, his pouches were on the desk and he quickly threw the covers away before getting out of bed. The first step made him stumble and a sharp pain passed through his midsection. He grabbed his side and stifled a groan before steadying himself. With 2 more painful steps he reached the desk and grabbed his pouches. He was just about to strap them when the door suddenly opened and his head snapped toward it. One of the most beautiful women he had ever seen entered the room. She was almost as tall as him, with long straight brown hair and shiny green eyes. She was wearing a red silk short-sleeved kimono that reached her thighs, which did nothing to hide her beautiful curves. Her face was that of an angel and her soft, fair skin seemed to glow in the dim lights of the room. The moment she saw him standing there, she flashed him a beautiful smile and entered. I'm glad to see you're awake, she spoke with a soft and melodic voice, truly fitting with her physical beauty. You were asleep for 3 whole days. We were worried. Snapping out of his shock induced by her beauty and her voice, he processed what he heard. 3 days. That was almost as long as when he passed out after fighting Gaara. His face hardened then. Where am I? Who are you and why am I here? Seeing his tense posture, the woman smiled. You are in a hostess club in a small town of the land of hot water. My name is Izumi and why you're here, she tapped her cheek with a cute smile. Will explain someone else. Naruto didn't like this situation at all, but he only nodded as the beautiful Izumi left the room. She didn't attack him and he wasn't restrained, so he would give her the benefit of the doubt. He was still standing and he could feel the pain in his midsection subside. It wasn't long until the door opened again, but this time, it wasn't a beautiful woman who entered. It was a big man with shaggy, long white hair. Naruto was immediately on edge when the man entered and he shifted his body more for running away than fighting. He could feel power rolling off the man and he knew he could not defeat him. The man closed the door behind him and stared the boy down. Seeing the boy's stance, the man broke in a grin. Glad to see you up and running, brat, he began. I thought you'd be napping for few more days at least. Your intestines were like a mashed potato when I found you. You found me? Naruto asked the man. Why am I here? Who are you? You are here because this is one of my rare safe spots that only I know. And for who I am, the man then grinned widely and dropped in a wide stance. I am the great and powerful Jiraiya. Naruto looked at him skeptically before his eyes widened in realization. You're the guy who wrote Ika, Paradise. Jiraiya positively beamed at the boy and pulled out the book in question before rushing to the boy. You know of my work? He asked excitedly as he waved the book around. Hell yeah, Naruto replied and snatched the book from the man's hand. Now I can finally read the 2nd chapter. Jiraiya pouted at the loss of his book but grinned again. I'm happy to see the next generation growing up splendidly. Yeah, Naruto said absent-mindedly as he stored the book safely in his hip pouch and placed both pouches on the desk. He then crossed his arms across his chest and looked at Jiraiya. I'd like to get some answers now. Jiraiya nodded. Sit on the bed, this will take a while, he said and sat on the chair by the desk. Seeing the boy sit, he began. But first I want to know why was Uzumaki Naruto branded as a traitor for cooperating with Orochimaru. Naruto's eyes widened at the fact that the man knew him. You know who I am. Jiraiya nodded. How? Later, Jiraiya replied. Now answer me. Naruto clenched his fists in anger. Danzo set me up. He sent me on a mission to locate a possible enemy camp, but instead of some no-name ninja, I was met by Orochimaru and his lackey. Orochimaru then left, so I only fought Kabuto. He was stronger than I thought, but he underestimated me greatly, so I managed to kill him. He managed to cut me up nicely though. Jiraiya frowned. Why did Danzo set you up? Did they tell you? Yeah, he wanted them to erase my memory so he could turn me into one of his root ninja, Naruto said with an angry nod. Danzo wanted you under his thumb from the moment the Kyuubi was sealed inside you, so I can see that happening, Jiraiya said. I don't see why Orochimaru would do that for him though. Did they tell you why? Naruto shook his head. They only told me what I told you. So he branded you as a traitor out of necessity. No one would believe you if you told them about Danzo and he could freely take you after you've been captured, Jiraiya said thoughtfully. You're lucky that I found you then. Yeah, I guess I am, Naruto replied with a sigh. So how do you know who I am? I don't think I've ever seen you before. You haven't, Jiraiya said and smiled. But I've seen you when you were just a baby. You look just like your father, it made me cry. Now you look even more like him, though you do have some of your mother's characteristics. Naruto was now shocked beyond belief. Why, you knew my parents? Of course I did, Jiraiya replied with a small laugh. I trained your father after all. Who were they? Naruto asked. No, begged the man. Jiraiya gave the boy a sorrowful smile. Your father was one of the strongest and kindest men I've ever had the chance to meet, and your mother was one of the most beautiful women with a gentle heart and a strong temper. They were Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. Why, Yondaime? Naruto gasped. He was my father. Jiraiya nodded and the boy lowered his head. I see. Now that he found out that the Yondaime was his father, he suddenly understood why the Kyuubi was sealed in him. If the Hokage wouldn't be willing to sacrifice his child, then who else would? It didn't mean he liked it, but he understood. I was also your godfather, Jiraiya suddenly added. Naruto's head shot up and anger flashed in his eyes. Why weren't you there for me then? Jiraiya sighed sadly. I had a spy network to run. For years after the Kyuubi attacked, I had to scout for possible attacks. Konoha was in shambles. Any hidden village could have destroyed us completely. I couldn't take a baby with me on dangerous missions, he rubbed his eyes. I would have met you after I finally had time, but I knew I could never stay for long and I never knew when I would be back. Naruto gripped his forehead and shut his eyes tightly, holding back tears that threatened to spill. He didn't know how to feel after hearing all this information. Do you have a picture? He asked quietly. Jiraiya nodded and pulled out a small photo out of his pouch before handing it to Naruto. The moment the boy saw the contents of the photo was the moment when the tears broke through. On the picture, two people sat on a grassy clearing. A smiling man with a blonde spiky hair and blue eyes was holding a beautiful red-haired woman with violet eyes. The happiness of the two was directed at a somewhat big lump on the woman's stomach. She was pregnant. With Naruto. The boy bit his lip to choke back a sob as he looked at the photo. After a minute he put the photo aside and wiped his tears away. A small and sad smile adorned his face. After all these years of wondering about them, I finally know. They loved you, Naruto, Jiraiya said. More than anything in this world. Naruto gave the man a thankful look and smiled. Thank you, for telling me. Jiraiya waved him of and wiped a tear of his own before the boy could see it. It was due time to tell you. I asked Sarutobi to let me be the one to tell you, but I never thought it would take so long. Gigi knew. He asked, slightly surprised. Who else knew? Aside the two of us, There was only one other person who knew, Jiraiya replied. I don't know who else figured it out though. I mean, you're the spitting image of your father. Naruto gave a sad chuckle. Can you tell me about them? Jiraiya sighed sadly. Not today, I'm sorry. I have to leave today and I still have to tell you some very important things before I go. I understand, Naruto said with a sad expression. I'll tell you all about them when I return though, Jiraiya said with a small grin. And I have plenty of stories. Naruto chuckled quietly as his mood was slightly lifted. Fair enough. So what else do you have to tell me? First, I want to give you something, Jiraiya began as he pulled out a scroll and offered it to the blonde. During the Kyuubi attack, your parents' house was destroyed. This was the only thing I managed to salvage. What is it? Naruto asked. Open it. It belonged to your mother, Jiraiya replied with a small smile. And Naruto did. Unrolling the scroll and unsealing its contents, a single item fell in his lap. The blonde took it in his hands and gaped a little. It was a tanto about the length of his forearm. Its white sheath shined in the dim light of the room. The handle was black and had a white strap wrapped around it. It also had a shiny gold guard. Taking a hold of the handle, he pulled the beautiful weapon out of its sheath, revealing the blade. It looked like a normal katana blade, only much shorter. The blade was shiny and only by looking at it, Naruto could tell it was sharp. Extremely sharp. He swung it around a few times, reveling in how light it was. It was a perfect fit for his hand, nothing like the Anbu ninjutsu he used before. Sheathing it, he put it to his side and bowed his head to Jiraiya. Thank you, he said. A lot. Jiraiya laughed lightly and waved him off. Don't mention it, kid, he said and pulled out 2 more scrolls. I'm not finished though, I still got something for you. This scroll, he held one scroll a little higher. Has your new clothes. Your old ones were full of blood and dirt, so I figured new clothes would be better. And this one, he raised the second scroll, contains necessary material for one of your father's signature techniques. Naruto's eyes widened. My father's jutsu. The Rasengan, Jiraiya said and opened his palm. Moments later, a ball of wildly spinning chakra materialized in his hand. Naruto looked at the small ball of destruction in wonder. It's a ball of condensed chakra capable of destroying practically anything. Awesome, Naruto whispered in excitement. It is, Jiraiya replied with a grin and took the third scroll. From it, he unsealed a single balloon filled with water. This technique is learned in 3 steps. This is the first one. Soon the balloon in his hand began to expand in certain places. Then it began to distort until it popped and the water spilled on the floor. Jiraiya chuckled sheepishly and scratched the back of his head. Well, you might want to do that somewhere else. So I need to use my chakra to pop the balloon? Naruto asked. Jiraiya raised a brow at the boy's quick thinking and nodded. Seems simple enough, Naruto said, scratching his cheek. What are the other 2 steps? This time Jiraiya grinned. You will have to find out those by yourself. Naruto looked at him blankly. Jiraiya laughed again. I know you'll have no trouble doing that, trust me. Naruto sighed. Well, I can't really complain. You've already given me so much. As I said, don't mention it, Jiraiya replied. You can begin training tomorrow. But now I want to go through some things with you. What are they? Naruto asked. I'm going back to the land of fire to find a certain person before Danzo does, Jiraiya began in a serious tone. While I'm away, you have to be careful. You are safest here and you can trust Izumi. Don't leave the club during the day and avoid the streets during the night. While I doubt Konoha would send teams out of the country so soon, I don't want to risk. You can safely train inside, but don't destroy anything. Naruto nodded. Alright. Do you know when you'll be back? I'll be away for at least a week, Jiraiya replied and stood up. I expect you to master the Rasengan by then. I will, no doubt, Naruto replied with a smile. No doubt at all, Jiraiya said with his own grin. He turned towards the door and opened it, but before he left, he turned to the blonde one more time. Oh, and no shadow clones. Naruto's smile became strained. As the man left, Naruto released a long sigh. He was still processing all information he heard tonight. He was tired and sore and he really wanted to sleep now. He stood up and safely stored the photo of his parents in his pouch and placed his tanto by it. Then he lifted the covers of the bed and slipped inside, his eyes closing already. He was interrupted by the door, however, and he sat up ready to kick Jiraiya out, only to lock eyes with the beautiful Izumi. "Ah, Izumi-san," Naruto said with a small blush. "What do you need?" The young woman smiled at him as she replied. Seeing that Jiraiya-sama left, I was about to turn in for the night, she closed the door behind her. Here. Well, it is my room, Naruto-kun, she replied with a cute chuckle. Naruto blushed slightly and began to raise the covers to get out of the bed. Then I'll sleep outside. Nonsense, the bed is big enough for both of us, she said with a smile as she sat on the bed. Besides, I was by your side for the past 2 nights already, so it shouldn't be a problem. Naruto's blush intensified. He wordlessly moved all the way to the end of the bed, taking as little space as he could. He could hear her chuckle again as she laid in the bed. "Good night, Naruto-kun," she said as she turned off the lamp. Good night, Izumi-san. It was going to be a long night. 4x. When Naruto woke up the next morning, he was utterly shocked and surprised to find out that he was not alone in the bed. His mind took a moment to process what happened last night and he sighed in relief that he was not in enemy territory. However, as he looked down at his sleeping companion, he suddenly felt extremely embarrassed for she was very close to him. Her right hand rested on his chest while her body rested against his side. Her head was on his shoulder and he could see every inch of her beautiful, sleeping face. Another shock was that, at some point during the night, he sneaked his right arm around her frame and pulled her closer to him. He was now effectively trapped and the only way to get out of bed was to wake her up. Which he did not want to do. That was when her green eyes opened and locked with his blue ones. A smile instantly appeared on her face. "Good morning, Naruto-kun," she said tiredly and yawned cutely. "Morning, Izumi-san," he replied with a higher voice than intended and a small blush crept on his cheeks. As she stopped yawning, she noticed the position of her body and playfully smirked. My, Naruto-kun. I didn't think you were so bold. We only met yesterday." Naruto's eyes widened and his blush intensified. I'm sorry, I always sleep alone so," he sputtered in embarrassment. The beauty chuckled as she gently patted his chest in reassurance. "It's all right, Naruto-kun," she said and began to sit up. "You will have to forgive me, but I have to prepare for the day." And with that, she let the top of her kimono slip off her shoulders. Naruto tried not to, but his eyes succumbed to the soft skin of her shoulders and he spent next few moments just watching her. It didn't take long for him to snap out of his daze. Izumi's cute chuckle helped, and jump out of the bed, grabbing his pouches, scrolls and tanto before rushing to the door. I'm gonna go train, he said looking back at her before leaving the room. Her amused chuckles could still be heard through the closed door. Finally getting his embarrassment under control, he looked around. He was in a wide hallway which led to another door with a stairway branching in the middle. He remembered Jiraiya telling him he could train inside, but he didn't really want to do that in the middle of the hall. So he went to the only other available door. Opening it, Naruto found himself in a room that seemed more like a dance studio. It was bigger than Izumi's and the walls were covered by mirrors. Even the door had a mirror on its back so it didn't disturb the wide visage reflection. It was calm and quiet, perfect for any kind of training he did. He was still only in his boxers though, so he dropped everything on the floor except for a single scroll. Unrolling it, he unsealed its contents. Seeing the pieces of clothing appear in his hands, Naruto began to dress. Black pants and his knee-high shinobi sandals came first. There were no gloves or his sleeveless shirt. Instead he had a sleeveless mesh shirt and a short-sleeved gray kimono shirt. He didn't complain though as he put them on. Last of the items was his forehead protector. He sighed as his finger traced the leaf symbol on the metal plate. He wouldn't wear it yet, not until he cleared his name. With heavy heart, he stored it in his pouch. Stretching out, he thought about what he should do first. He was interested in the technique Jiraiya showed him, but first, he wanted to familiarize himself with the tanto of his mother. Taking the short blade of the floor, he pulled it out of the sheath. He gazed at the shiny blade and swung it a few times. It was really light, yet it looked like it could block any attack. Naruto then began going through the katas he learned while training with Danzo. His body moved gracefully, going through the motions with great care. He soon realized that the style he knew was not suited for the weapon he was using. Since the tanto was shorter than the ninjutsu, he needed to get closer to his opponent, and the style he used didn't prepare him for that. He would have to do something about it if he ever wanted to use the weapon skillfully. Sheathing the blade, he placed it on the ground before picking up the second scroll. He unsealed a single water balloon and held it gently in his open palm. Now he just had to pop it with only his chakra. Simple, right? It wasn't though, as he spent next 10 minutes looking at the balloon that was only expanding horizontally. It didn't pop, and the seemingly easy task became much harder. Naruto did not give up though, and he spent next few hours trying. He forced his irritation down as his progress was non-existent. He really wished Jiraiya gave him more tips. 4x. There was an all-around somber mood in Konoha. The village was mostly repaired and its occupants began to return to the lives they had before the fiasco of the Chunin exams. Ninja began to take on missions and the trade routes began to flow once again. A certain group of Konoha genin was more somber than the others though. Teams 7, 8 and 10 gathered at the training ground 7 for the first time since they graduated. The excuse was to train and bond as Konoha shinobi, yet there was no training today. One person was on their minds. Uzumaki Naruto was a true mystery. He was the dead last of their class, yet he was the strongest of them during the final exam. And now he was branded as a traitor of Konoha and teams actively hunted him across the land. They didn't know what they should believe. Their sensei told them to believe in Naruto, yet many spoke differently. This gathering was also for the purpose of deciding where they stood. There was a heavy silence for a while now, and one Chunin finally had enough of it. This silence is really troublesome, Shikamaru began from his sitting position. Sakura, you called us here, so start talking. Sakura, now center of attention, steeled herself. Do you believe what they say? She asked. Do you believe that Naruto is traitor? Another bout of silence ensued. What do you believe in? Shikamaru asked back. I believe that he is not a traitor, Sakura said with resolution. Sure, he did pranks as a kid, but he would never go as far as to betray the village. And that is my answer as well, Shikamaru said. I would sooner put my hand in a fire than think that for a second. And he meant every word. Other than Danzo, he was the only one who paid the blonde enough attention to realize that Naruto wore a mask. He didn't know why or what hid behind it, but he knew it wasn't a traitor. But they found evidence, Ino suddenly exclaimed. They could have easily been framed. Strange enough, it came from Kiba. He might have not known about the mask, but he knew he had fun pranking others with Naruto. It is highly possible, Shino said. It was something his father told him about the blonde and what he held that spurred him to comply. And if they're not? Ino asked. Then we won't hold back, Shikamaru said resolutely. But until we see him again, I will believe they are. Right. Chubby Akamichi exclaimed. Naruto loves ramen, and no one who loves ramen would be able to be bad. Ino sighed as she palmed her forehead. Her eyes then darted between the two who had yet to say anything. Hinata was unusually calm, her usually blushing cheeks were pale and her hands rested by her sides. Sasuke on the other hand was fidgety and restless. It was strange seeing the two practically switch personalities so suddenly. What do you think, Sasuke-kun? She asked the boy whose head snapped towards her. His eyes were wide and brimming with emotions ranging from anger and confusion to disbelief. There's no way that the Dobi went rouge, Uchiha replied angrily. If she listened, Hinata would add a nod of her own, but she was in her own world now. Ino felt a bit embarrassed that she was the only one who doubted Naruto, but she quickly regained her composure. So what do we do now? We wait, Shikamaru simply said. We do missions and wait. When the time comes, we will see him again and find out the truth. The mood significantly lightened after their conversation, and soon they began the intended light training. Their thoughts were still on the blonde boy though. 4x. Naruto sneezed as he lay in bed with Izumi lying next to him. After their first morning of waking up together, Izumi had no qualms of resting her head on his shoulder when they went to bed. Naruto also relented after 2 nights and with a much smaller blush put his arm around her. After all, it was really comfortable. Someone must be talking about you, Naruto-kun, she said with a light giggle. Naruto didn't reply as he glared at the single water balloon that rested on the desk. He was not getting any progress at all and his patience was wearing thin. Izumi noticed how tense he was and gently rubbed her hand on his bare chest. Naruto-kun, she said gently, making him break his glare and look at her. You have been training almost all day every day with barely any rest. You really need to relax a little. Naruto released a sigh. I can't. If I don't train, I think I'm going to lose it. And yet you're losing it either way, Izumi replied flatly. Naruto scoffed softly. Yeah, you're right, he sighed again. But all these thoughts just won't leave my head. Then let me help you banish those thoughts, Naruto-kun, she said in a tone Naruto didn't recognize. It was soft yet heavy and it carried some hidden meaning. What do you mean? He asked unsure. Her only answer was to move up and kiss his lips. It was a soft kiss yet it shocked Naruto to the core. Her soft lips brushed gently against his, sending shivers through his body. She parted her lips slightly, placing kisses across his as her hand moved lower to rub his stomach. All the while Naruto was frozen in shock. After a while she moved back slightly to look into his eyes. What's wrong? She asked seeing his expression. Did you not like it? No nota ta all, the blonde replied as his face heated up. It's just that I've never done this before. She finished for him and he nodded. She smiled. Will you trust me? He nodded. Then just let go. And then she captured his lips again, with a little more force this time. Her tongue began to lick his lips, asking for entrance, and the blonde couldn't help but open them. Izumi wasted no time and pushed her tongue inside his mouth, looking for his own. Their tongues danced around, one skillfully while other inexperienced. She pulled back slightly to nibble at his lower lip, drawing a gasp from the blonde. While they kissed, her hand on his stomach moved lower and into his boxers, enveloping his slowly hardening in her soft hand. She gently stroked it as blood flowed through it, making it harder with each passing second. Soon enough, his was fully hard, visibly poking out of his boxers. She didn't stop stroking him as his groans became louder and soon she could feel the hard throb painfully. Naruto was surprised and annoyed that her gentle hand stopped stroking him suddenly and her warm lips separated from his. Looking at her, she only smiled teasingly and moved back to straddle his legs. Wasting no time, she hooked her fingers at the hem of his boxers and pulled them off, revealing his hard and stiff member to the world. It twitched at the feel of cold air brushing against it. Izumi saw how tortured it looked and swiftly moved lower to envelop the head with her lips. Naruto moaned as he felt her hot breath and her tongue caressing the head. Her hands were not idle and she stroked him, bringing him closer to the edge. Moving her hand lower, she wrapped only her thumb and index finger around the base and squeezed lightly as her head lowered. Naruto moaned again as more and more of his disappeared in her warm and wet mouth. Her tongue danced around the hard rod, licking it and coating it with her saliva. She could feel the throbbing veins with the tip of her tongue. With another loud moan, Naruto came inside her mouth, coating her throat with his cum. Feeling the first rope of the hot liquid hit the back of her throat, she pulled back, letting only the head stay between her lips. Her mouth filled with his cum, her cheeks puffing from the amount of thick semen. Some of it managed to sneak through her lips and a trail of cum trailed down her chin. As he stopped coming, Izumi allowed the head of his to fall out of her mouth. She then leaned her head back and swallowed until her mouth was free of sticky, white cum. She looked at him as she breathed harder, trying to catch her breath. She slowly scooped up the cum off her chin with her finger and licked it clean. The sight of that was enough to make Naruto hard again. She smiled at him and undid her kimono, letting his eyes roam her now naked body. Izumi was gorgeous with fair skin, slender waist and large, and Naruto thought his would explode again from simply watching her. Izumi saw the lust and desire in his eyes and leaned down to kiss him again, this time more passionately and hungrily. Meanwhile, her hips positioned above his raging hard-on and the tip of his poked her wet opening. She began to lower her hips, letting more and more of his to disappear inside her. They moaned in unison as Naruto sheathed himself fully inside her. Izumi took a moment to adjust before she began to ride him. Moans of pleasure filled the room as she increased her pace. Her hands gripped his chest while his rested on her, squeezing it. He tried to match her pace with his own raising hips, but he failed. Not that it bothered her at all. Izumi then began to clench his tighter, which made the blonde groan in pleasure and his throbbed painfully. Her lips smashed against his as she felt herself getting closer to her climax. Naruto could also feel it as her walls clenched his member in a vice grip. Her nails dug in his skin as she screamed her climax in his mouth. Naruto was not far away as his hands squeezed her as hard and he began to empty himself inside her, groaning all the way. It took a while before the two came down there high and Izumi slumped on his chest, his slipping out of her. They both panted heavily, their sweat mixing on their bodies. Are you relaxed now? Izumi asked the boy beneath her with a panting giggle. Naruto could only nod. Why yeah, he gasped out. Izumi giggled again and pulled the covers over them. With their breathing back to normal, she rested her head on his chest while he wrapped his arms around her waist. Their eyes began to close from exhaustion and the two could only wish each other good night with tired voices before they fell asleep. Before his eyes fully closed, Naruto thought training would be much, much easier. 3 people and 1 pig sat at a table in a small town near the northeastern border of the Land of Fire. 2 women and 1 man drank in silence as the time passed, and only exchange would be a glare from one of the women. Finally, not being able to endure the silence, the sole man of the group spoke. Tsunade, we need your help, Jiraiya said almost pleadingly. A scoff was heard from the woman named Tsunade. Not a chance, you old toad. I told you I cut my ties with that place long ago. Well, Konoha did not cut ties with you, Jiraiya replied seriously. Danzo's in charge now, it won't be long until he declares you a Nukenin. You think I can't handle Danzo's zombies? Who do you think I am, Jiraiya? Is that really what you want? Jiraiya asked as he took a sip of his sake. You want to run away as a Nukenin for the rest of your life? Better than going back to that place, Tsunade replied bitterly. You know how much that village has taken from me. Yes, I know, Jiraiya sighed. But those two would never want your life to end up like this. A fierce glare was sent in his direction. What the hell do you know? I knew them well enough to know they would never want someone they loved to end up like a cowardly Nukenin. Jiraiya said heatedly. You knew what their dream was, didn't you? Yes, I did, Tsunade replied, her glare still ready. And look what that led them to. So you would let their sacrifice to be in vain? Jiraiya asked. Sensei's as well. Better than to go to war we cannot win, Tsunade said with finality. Do you think you and that brat of yours can do anything against Danzo? Yes, Jiraiya replied firmly. Naruto knows how to end the root from the inside and find evidence that will turn the village against Danzo. And what worth is that brat of yours? He's just some snot-nosed genin who barely got his forehead protector. A Chunin, Jiraiya corrected. And he's damn strong. He beat the Shukaku by himself and I already have him train on the Rasengan. Rasengan? Tsunade asked with a mild surprise. Why would you teach him that? Well, it is his father's technique, after all. A gasp was heard from both women. Why, you couldn't mean? Tsunade whispered in shock. Jiraiya nodded. Yes, I do. Naruto, or should I say Uzumaki Naruto, is son of Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. Kushina. Tsunade brought her hand to her mouth in shock. How? After the Kyuubi attacked and Minato sealed him, a child was found. Their child, Jiraiya said solemnly. I knew they were expecting, but I never knew when he was due. After I found out, I was already out of the village, but Sensei knew who that child was. I can't believe it, Tsunade said, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. If not for Konoha, would you help us at least for him? Jiraiya asked quietly. Tsunade stayed silent for a minute. I'll think about it. All right, Jiraiya said as he stood up. I will wait at the north end of the village in the morning if you decide to come, and with that, he left. Silence reigned among two remaining women as time passed. Tsunade drank a full bottle of sake by then. Not being able to see her friend droning in sadness and alcohol, younger woman put a hand on her shoulder. Tsunade-sama, what will you do? Shizune asked quietly. Tsunade began with a sigh. I don't know. What do you think I should do? Shizune stayed quiet for a moment before responding. If not for Konoha, then do it for Naruto-kun. You are his godmother after all, she finished with a sad smile. And I'm sure Kushina-sama would love for you to be by his side. Tsunade sighed. You really have a way with words, you know that. Shizune only smiled. They stayed at the table for a while longer, drinking and thinking before they retired for the night. 4x. 2 weeks have passed since Naruto woke up after his fight with Kabuto. He mostly stayed indoors, going out only at night and for short amount of time. He had his training in Izumi to keep him busy, so he couldn't complain. He was already in the last stage of learning Rasengan. After finally popping the water balloon, he easily figured out the second step. Overloading the rubber ball was fairly easy with the amount of chakra he had, and now he just had to combine the two steps to finish the technique. He managed to do it once, but he couldn't contain the ball of chakra for more than few seconds. He also trained with his mother's Tanto. Using shadow clones, he managed to adjust his kenjutsu style for closer combat, moving in and out to deal damage with the blade. When he inspected the blade closer, he noticed that channeling chakra through it was much easier than through his ninjutsu, and he began to add both wind and lightning chakra to the blade. With wind, he gained range and extreme sharpness which could cut through most things. With lightning, he gained extreme penetration abilities as well as cutting power. Now he wanted to be able to switch from one element to the other fast so he could use it effectively in battle. His relationship with Izumi confused him though. He was sure he wasn't in love with her, but he couldn't deny that he liked her. Otherwise, he knew there wouldn't be any kind of serious relationship after he left, since he was a ninja on the run while she was a hostess in a different country. If he had to name it, he would say they were friends with benefits, a term he found in Jiraiya's book. And from what he saw, she didn't seem to mind. In all honesty though, Naruto was getting restless. His kenjutsu training reached its peak, and the only way to improve it further would be through battles. He was also confident that he would finish the Rasengan in few days. After that, he would have nothing to do until Jiraiya returned. He sighed as another Rasengan failed to form in his palm. Clenching his tired fist, he dropped on the floor and lied down. It was close to midday and Izumi would soon come to bring him lunch. He would have to thank the girl a lot because he would probably go for days without eating. The sound of doors being opened caught his attention, and he turned his head expecting to see the green-eyed beauty, only to see the familiar figure of Jiraiya. Yo, the man greeted with a grin. Damn it, Jiraiya. I thought you died by now, Naruto replied with a sigh as he stood up and faced the man. Right, Jiraiya said flatly. What if I told you that I wanted to give you more time with Izumi-chan? Naruto blushed slightly. How do you know about that? Jiraiya's eyebrows rose as a grin split his face. I didn't. He replied with a giggle as Naruto slapped his forehead. So, Naruto began as his embarrassment faded. Since you returned, does that mean you found who you were looking for? Of course. Jiraiya replied with a huff. I'm Jiraiya-sama, greatest spy in elemental nations. There is no one I can't find. Who was it? You'll meet her soon, was Jiraiya's reply. Now pack your stuff and say your goodbyes. We're leaving. I'll be ready in 5 minutes, Naruto said as he approached the door. I'll be waiting on the roof, Jiraiya replied and disappeared. Naruto shook his head with a chuckle as he entered the room he shared with Izumi. His pouches were on the desk so he strapped them on, as well as the tanto on his lower back. Then he put his sandals on and turned to leave only to see Izumi standing at the door. She smiled at him as he approached her and wrapped her arms around him in a gentle hug. Safe travels, Naruto-kun. Her gentle voice calmed him and he wrapped his arms around her shoulders. Thank you, Izumi-san. The beauty giggled. I told you not to call me that, Naruto-kun. I'm not that old. Naruto laughed slightly. Alright, Izumi-chan. Izumi pulled back and smiled at the blonde before kissing him softly on the cheek. Goodbye, Naruto-kun. Goodbye, he replied and they separated. Naruto then left the room and went to the roof. Jiraiya looked at Naruto as he appeared by his side and nodded. The blonde returned the nod and they both disappeared with a shunshin. They reappeared in a forest outside the town, hidden by the dense trees. Naruto then looked at the bigger man. So when will I meet this mysterious woman you took so long to locate? He asked. Jiraiya snorted and pointed behind him. There she is, brat. And true to his words, a woman appeared, or two to be more precise. Both very beautiful, yet very different. One was a tall woman with blonde hair set in 2 pigtails. She had brown eyes, a diamond-shaped mark on her forehead and a pair of biggest he had ever seen in his life. The second woman was shorter, with a short black hair and black eyes. Her black kimono covered her entire body but her curves were still prominent. She also held a small pig in her arms wearing a red vest and a pearl necklace. The blonde approached him first. He had no problems watching only her face as he engraved the image of her deeply in his mind. She stopped in front of him with a strange look in her eyes as she stared at his face. He raised a brow in curiosity and was about to ask her what's wrong when she spoke. You look just like her, she said softly and Naruto's eyes widened. You have his hair and eyes though, she let a soft smile as she watched his shocked expression. I'm so happy to finally meet you, Naruto. Then she did something that surprised everyone there. She hugged him. Naruto stood still in shock as a pair of strong, feminine arms wrapped around his shoulders and his face was buried in a pair of soft mounds. He was even more shocked when he felt tears fall on top of his head and the woman shuddered as she choked back a sob. I thought you died, she said quietly, her voice quivering. Naruto finally regained his composure and with some difficulty, raised his head to look at the crying woman. Who are you? The woman forced a laugh as she released him and wiped her tears away. My name is Senju Tsunade. I am your godmother. Naruto's eyes widened in shock. What? Tsunade laughed again, this time softer and less forced. I was a good friend of your mother for a long time. I watched her grow from a feisty little girl to a strong kunoichi she was. I loved her dearly and, when she asked me to be your godmother, I was overjoyed, her smile then turned sad. I was away from the village before you were born. When I heard of her death, I was crushed. And I thought you died as well. Tsunade, Naruto said softly. In just 2 weeks, his life changed greatly. He found out that his parents loved him and that he even had godparents. It was a lot to take in, honestly. I don't know what to say. Tsunade smiled softly and hugged him again, and Naruto hugged her back. You don't have to say anything. Just know that I will be here for you when you need me. Naruto smiled and shut his eyes tight, preventing tears from escaping. Thank you. The other two people stood on the side, watching the heartfelt reunion with smiles. It was a few minutes later when the pair separated and Naruto turned towards the last unknown member of the group. The black-haired beauty smiled and approached him. It's great to finally meet you, Naruto-kun, she began. My name is Shizune and I am Tsunade-sama's apprentice. And this is Taunton, she finished, raising the pig slightly. Naruto smiled at the two and gave them a small bow. It's nice to meet you, Shizune-san, Taunton-chan. Shizune smiled and Taunton oinked. You don't have to be so formal, Naruto-kun. Just call me Shizune. Naruto nodded with a smile. A cough was then heard from Jiraiya and all turned to face him. Now that we're all well acquainted, it's time to discuss important matters, he said seriously. Of course, Tsunade said. As much as I would love to spend some time with my godson, I hear he got himself in quite a bit of trouble, she finished, giving Naruto a pointed look. Naruto huffed. Not my fault. Jiraiya chuckled. Be that as it may, you are in trouble now, so we have to plan ahead. So what now? Naruto asked. Now, we train, Jiraiya replied. Tsunade and Shizune will return to Konoha and be our inside informants while the two of us go somewhere else. Is that safe? Naruto asked with concern in his eyes. Don't worry, brat, Jiraiya replied. Tsunade can take care of herself and, now that she will go back willingly, there won't be any problems. Won't Danzo be suspicious though? Oh, you bet he will, Jiraiya chuckled. That bastard will have his men watch her every move for a while, but he can't outright hurt her for no reason. Naruto nodded. What about us? We are going to the land of water, or more specifically, Kurigakure. What? Naruto asked in slight shock, feeling shared by the women as well. They are in the middle of civil war now. What could we possibly gain from going there? I know that, brat. We are going there to help the rebels win the war, Jiraiya replied. And we have much to gain. You'll get battle experience, which is more valuable than any training, and we can possibly get some allies in the long run. And they will welcome us with open arms? Naruto asked skeptically. Not us, you, Jiraiya replied, pointing at him. I'll have to leave you there since I can't let Danzo find out I'm with you. It'll break my cover and possibly Tsunade's. Besides, I have a lead on a dangerous organization I need to check out. You sure this is safe? Naruto asked, this time with worry in his voice. Don't worry, Jiraiya ruffled his hair. I know you can take care of yourself. Naruto sighed and moved the man's hand off his head. What about my training? Sure, the experience is necessary, but it's not enough. I'll leave you a scroll with some techniques and give you some pointers as well, Jiraiya replied. You won't stagnate, trust me. Fine, Naruto said. Are we leaving immediately? Yeah, Jiraiya said. I wish I could give you two some more time to talk, but Tsunade has to get back to the village before Danzo sends his men after her. Don't worry, Naru-chan, Tsunade said, seeing the sad look in his eyes. We'll have a drink after you return to the village. Naruto looked at her in annoyance at the name before smiling slightly. Sure. Well then, Jiraiya began. Let's go. Without any more words, 4 shinobi jumped to the trees and headed south. 4x. Danzo sat in his chair as his hand gripped the report he was holding. It has been over 2 weeks now. There was no sign of Naruto anywhere. He had sent out the best tracking teams in Konoha and none of them found anything. He still cursed Orochimaru for failing. He had another trouble on his mind, however. It was time to deal with Tsunade, as he couldn't allow her to wander around anymore. She was an important pawn in this game, being the strongest kunoichi in Konoha. Danzo would give her one chance to come willingly. If she refused, she would be branded as a nukenin and hunted down. Fu, he said suddenly, and a single ninja appeared before him. Take a team and locate Senju Tsunade and bring her back. Hiruzen may have given her leniency, but I will not. If she refuses, you have permission to take her down. As you command, Danzo-sama, Fu replied emotionlessly and disappeared. With the task given, Danzo returned to his thinking. He was already planning on invading some smaller countries, but it was still too early to set those plans to motion. Now he had to strengthen his forces to show that Konoha was still strong even without their Jinchuriki. When Naruto was found, however, all of his plans could begin. 4x. Team 7 walked through the gates of Konoha after their mission. With Naruto's absence, they were given another member, Sai. The boy was a capable shinobi, although his social skills were terrible. The moment he met the team, he gave them weird nicknames and basically insulted them. His presence wasn't the only change in the team. When Naruto left, Kakashi began to seriously train his 2 remaining students, focusing on their weaknesses as well as strengths. He gave Sakura training in endurance and genjutsu, while Sasuke trained with and without his Sharingan. The 2 genin also changed a lot. Sakura was a lot quieter and she began to take her training seriously. She also stopped pestering Sasuke and spent her free time in the library, reading about any possible skills she found useful as well as finding out as much as possible about the world beyond the walls of Konoha. Sasuke changed the most though. After Kakashi put him in his place, his attitude changed completely. He no longer belittled his peers and tried to be cordial with them when they crossed paths. He was still asocial and didn't seek friendship, but he acknowledged people around him. Kakashi could honestly say that he was proud of them. In a way, Naruto's disappearance made them better even if the price was high. He sighed as he thought about his former student. He didn't believe he was a traitor and was glad his students thought the same. He wished he could talk to him and find out the truth, but that was impossible. All he could do now was do his best as a sensei and wait. When Jiraiya returned to the village, he would be sure to talk to him. 4x. 4 figures could be seen running across the trees of the Land of Fire. The plan was to travel together for a while before they would split so they could talk about the plan more. Currently, they were just east of Atofika in a large clearing where they stopped to rest. It was the final point before they went separate ways. Take care of yourself, Naruto, Tsunade said as she gave the blonde a gentle hug. You too, Naruto replied as he returned it. The 2 then separated and Naruto went to stand by Jiraiya. You know the plan, Tsunade, Jiraiya said and Tsunade gave him a nod. Now all that's left is. His speech was cut short as they all had to dodge a hail of shuriken heading their way. The 4 shinobi went into battle stances as they scanned their surroundings for the location of the enemy. They didn't have to look for long as 2 figures appeared. A tall man with blue skin and a huge sword on his back and a shorter man with long black hair and a pair of Sharingan eyes. They both wore identical black cloaks with red clouds on them. Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame, Jiraiya said warily as he stared the 2 down. Other 3 tensed immediately as they knew who these 2 were. Kisame grinned. Glad to know we're known around Itachi. Itachi said nothing as he merely stared at Naruto. The Bond was unnerved at the stare and he could feel something trying to invade his mind. Pulsing out his chakra, he cancelled the genjutsu and lowered his gaze. Don't look in his eyes, he said seriously. Looks like the brat is smarter than he looks, Kisame said mockingly. Indeed, Itachi replied stoically. What do 2S-ranked shinobi such as yourselves want with us? Jiraiya asked dangerously. If these 2 were here, the fight was unavoidable. Such criminals did not appear for idle chit-chat. We care none of you, Itachi said. It's Naruto-kun that is our target. Oh really? Jiraiya asked. And why is that? It is none of your concern, Itachi said. If you would be so kind and allow us to take him, we do not have to fight. A scoff was hard. Yeah right. I guess we have to fight then huh? Tsunade asked. Itachi glanced at the woman for a moment. Kisame, take her out. Kisame didn't wait for even a second after he heard that and charged at the woman with a manic grin. He appeared in front of her in a second with swinging a kunai. The group tensed and went to help her, but before they could even take a step, Kisame was back by Itachi's side. Worked as a charm, Kisame said with a grin, and everyone looked at Tsunade. The woman in question was shaking uncontrollably and her face was covered in drops of blood. Jiraiya watched her in shock before looking at Kisame. Blood dripped from his left hand and Jiraiya realized that the kunai wasn't heading for Tsunade at all. What's wrong with her? Naruto asked in slight panic after seeing the strongest woman in the world shivering like a leaf on the water. She's afraid of blood, Jiraiya replied curtly. Shizune, stay back and take care of her. Are you sure, Jiraiya-sama? Shizune asked. Jiraiya nodded. We'll be fine. Shizune gave him an unsure nod and grabbed her mentor before jumping away from them. The two ninja now looked at their opponents. So how do you want to do this, kid? Jiraiya asked the boy at his side. He wanted to see how analytical Naruto's mind was. I'll take the big guy, Naruto said looking at Kisame. He is a straightforward fighter who uses his sword and water ninjutsu. I can counter him with my Raiden. On the other hand, he glanced at Itachi briefly, careful not to look in his eyes. I have no experience in fighting against Sharingan and I'm not much against Genjutsu. Jiraiya gave him a proud look before looking at his opponent. Alright then. Be careful, Naruto. Kisame is an extremely strong shinobi. Yeah, I know, Naruto replied looking at the grinning Kisame. It seems you ladies finally reached some consensus, Kisame said mockingly. Shall we dance? He finished and gripped his sword before charging at them. Naruto quickly unsheathed his tanto and met his charge head-on. Two weapons clashed and Naruto thought his arm would break. Kisame had the strength of a rhino and it took everything Naruto had not to drop on the ground. With a roar, Naruto pushed his tanto forward and deflected the giant sword before spinning and shooting a roundhouse kick to Kisame's head. It failed however as Kisame lifted his arm and blocked the kick. That stung a bit, the blue-skinned man said, and Naruto quickly jumped away to avoid the weapon heading for his head. Then I'll make sure it stings even more, Naruto replied, and lightning chakra coated his arms and legs as well as his tanto. Kisame only grinned. Bring it on, kid. And the two charged again. 4x. Jiraiya and Itachi took a calmer approach to a battle as they stared each other down. First move was always critical in a fight. It would make it or break it and only those of highest skill could salvage a failed first attack. Jiraiya considered his options as he remembered everything he knew about Itachi. The Uchiha was all around a perfect fighter. His taijutsu was great and his ninjutsu as well as genjutsu was on a whole different level as befitting of an Uchiha. It was a slight twitch of Itachi's hand that warned him and Jiraiya quickly spun around with a kunai in his hand to block the blade of Itachi's clone. With a strong kick, he dispelled the clone but couldn't rest as he had to block another attack from the real Itachi. Itachi didn't give him a chance to retaliate though as a stream of fire escaped from his mouth. Jiraiya quickly used Kawarimi to evade the attack and appeared behind the Uchiha. Itachi jumped in the air to avoid a kunai to his neck and spun around to send a hail of kunai at the Sannin to prevent him from attacking while he was in the air. Landing a safe distance away, Itachi sent a ball of fire from his mouth right at Jiraiya, who slammed his hands on the ground and a wall of dense mud rose to protect him. As the fire died out, Jiraiya channeled chakra to his right arm and punched the mud wall. Blocks of hardened mud were sent at Itachi at high speed, promising heavy damage if they hit. Itachi predicted the trajectories of the blocks with his Sharingan and evaded them all the while making a set of hand seals. A large dragon made of fire escaped his mouth and flew at Jiraiya, who spewed a wall of water from his mouth. The two techniques met with a loud explosion and the area around Jiraiya was enveloped with steam. Itachi carefully scanned his surroundings but he quickly had to jump in the air to avoid a pair of hands that tried to pull him underground. He wasn't given any time of rest as Jiraiya burst out of the ground and sent a ball of fire at him. Itachi was enveloped in fire instantly. Jiraiya was still on high alert, which proved beneficial as he managed to block a kunai that would have sliced his neck. Itachi's cloak was slightly singed but, other than that, he was unharmed. Jiraiya quickly sent chakra to his hair and his ponytail grew in length to wrap around Itachi. The Uchiha pushed his kunai forward making Jiraiya take a step back and jumped away to avoid the attack. He threw several kunai at Jiraiya, which multiplied in dozens, and the Sannin manipulated his hair to wrap around him in a protective cocoon. The kunai bounced off the hardened hair and fell to the ground and Itachi sent another fireball at Jiraiya. Jiraiya had no time to dodge and this time he was enveloped in fire, his only defense was his hardened hair. It wasn't much but it was still enough to protect him while he charged through the inferno at Itachi. His clothes smoked at the hems and his wild hair flayed around, flying at Itachi again. Itachi scoffed and evaded but that gave Jiraiya a split-second opening. Not stopping his charge, Jiraiya channeled chakra in his right hand and a blue ball of dense, spiraling chakra formed. He extended his hand forward, aiming for Itachi's ribs. The Uchiha's eyes widened and, thanks to all of his hard-earned battle experience, he managed to avoid a broken ribcage by a hair. He didn't evade it completely though and he was sent flying. Itachi managed to catch himself in the air and land on his feet but his hand still went to clutch his ribs. He could feel at least two broken from the attack. Had the Rasengan hit fully, his ribs would be crushed and he would most likely die. Sparing a moment to wipe a trail of blood of his mouth, he gazed at his opponent. "You are as strong as they say, Jiraiya-sama," Itachi said stoically. "You are truly a terrifying opponent." Jiraiya knew his opponent was just fishing for time but did not try to attack as he also needed a moment to rest. It was quite some time since his last high-level fight. "I can say the same thing about you, Itachi," Jiraiya said. "So much power yet you are so young. I'm afraid that this fight won't go anywhere if we keep on like this," Itachi said as his Sharingan started to spin. "How about we raise the stakes?" Jiraiya grinned. "Oh, I was hoping you would say that." 4x. Naruto parried another swing of Kisame's sword to the side and raised his lightning-coated leg to land a strong kick to the man's face. This time, Kisame didn't block as he knew the lightning chakra would most likely paralyze his arm. He leaned his head back, avoiding the kick, and swung his sword back to catch the offending leg. Naruto saw the action and quickly diverted his leg towards the sword. The leg and the sword met with a loud bang and Naruto kicked off the sword, spinning around with the added momentum, to kick Kisame's ribs. Kisame grunted in annoyance and jumped away to evade before thrusting his sword forward and charging. Naruto, still in the spinning motion, bent his stationary leg in a crouch to let the sword pass over his head before clashing his tanto against the offending weapon and sending it to the air. Using the created opening, he pointed his tanto at his opponent and thrust it towards the man. Kisame saw the sharp blade heading for his heart and quickly kicked Naruto's hand making him lose the grip on his tanto. The tanto slipped out of his hand and stabbed the ground several feet away. With his weapon lost, Naruto jumped away to gain some distance. "You're pretty good for a brat," Kisame said while grinning as he leaned his sword on his shoulder. "And you're pretty good for a fish," Naruto replied with his own grin. Kisame's grin took on a malicious glint. "Oh, I will enjoy shredding you apart," he said as he pointed his sword at the blonde. "I'd like to see you try," Naruto said with a smirk. Kisame reacted immediately as he spun around to slice Naruto's shadow clone in two, leaving his back to Naruto. That opening was all the original needed as his hands flashed through hand seals and a beam of lightning flew from his mouth straight at Kisame. The bigger man saw the beam from the corner of his eye and smirked. It was a good strategy. Not good enough though. Naruto watched in shock as Kisame's raised sword absorbed his lightning beam in mere seconds. What more, he could swear he heard the sword groan in delight as if it just had a pleasant meal. His eyes shifted back to Kisame's grinning face. "What the hell was that?" Naruto asked. "Like it?" Kisame asked with a chuckle. "This is Samahata. It absorbs chakra. And shreds," he added as the bandages covering the sword were ripped apart. Naruto could now see the sword in its full glory of blue spikes. I think we played enough, don't you? With that, he charged at Naruto again. Naruto barely managed to dodge a swipe that would rip his head off and backflip away to avoid a kick to his chin. Making two shadow clones, Naruto's hands flashed through hand seals as the clones charged at Kisame. The clones were instantly destroyed, but they gave the original enough time to complete his technique. Taking a deep breath, Naruto blew a strong gust of wind at his opponent. Kisame raised his sword to protect himself from the attack, but he could do nothing as the small wind blades cut up his arms and legs. As the attack ended, Kisame lowered his sword only to notice that Naruto wasn't where he was before. Sharpening his senses, he barely turned around to block an attack from behind. While Kisame was distracted by Naruto's previous attack, the blonde snatched his tanto out of the ground and attacked the man from behind. His surprise attack failed, and now he was pushing his weapon against the much larger sword with all his might. His teeth clenched as Kisame began to overpower him, and with a roar of defiance he pushed harder. Then, bright light engulfed them. 4x. Shizune watched with wide eyes as two battles raged in front of her. She knew Jiraiya was strong and he could match Itachi easily, but she never expected Naruto to be able to fight against the S-ranked Kisame and survive. The boy held his ground and matched Kisame perfectly, but she knew the Nukenin wasn't going all out. If he was, Naruto would probably be dead by now. Tsunade was by her side, still trembling, yet her eyes never left the blonde boy fighting in front of her. She cursed herself for her weakness that prevented her from helping him. She hated being useless deadweight, but she could do nothing against it. The blood on her face brought all those painful memories back. Dan, Nawaki and all the others that she couldn't save appeared before her eyes again. She watched Naruto sending a gust of wind at Kisame before attacking him from behind. Then she gasped in shock as the light appeared. 4x. At first there was nothing. Then a pained scream echoed across the clearing. Jiraiya and Itachi stopped their fight to look at the other fighting pair from where the scream came. Their eyes widened as the light died down and they could see what happened there. Naruto stood there with a weapon in his hands. It wasn't his tanto, however, as the small blade transformed. In his hands now was a greatsword, with a straight and wide blade as black as night and as long as he was tall. The blade was connected to a long handle wrapped in white tape with excess tape hanging from the pommel. And in front of him was Kisame, kneeling, and missing his left arm. The spectators watched in shock as Kisame's arm rolled on the ground and blood poured from his shoulder. The man in question watched the stump in shock as he stopped screaming, barely believing what he was seeing. Naruto was shocked as well, more because of the huge weapon that appeared in his hands. Even with the bigger size, the sword was still light and he had no problem holding it up. The black blade gleamed in the sun and the blood on it looked almost purple under the sun. Ah, it's so good to be out again. What's up, Kushi-cha? Who the hell are you? Naruto watched his sword in shock as a voice appeared in his head. A voice that seemed to originate from the sword itself. The voice was surprisingly feminine and nothing like one would expect seeing the dangerous blade. He was cringed slightly as the voice began to scream in his head. Who the hell are you and why are you wielding me? Where is Kushi-chan? What the hell? Naruto muttered quietly. The voice growled cutely, preparing for another rant when it was interrupted by a much lower and more sinister growl. Naruto looked down at his opponent and saw the murderous glare sent his way. His blood chilled as those small, beady eyes locked with his, promising painful death. You, Kisame growled at the blonde. You bastard. You're dead. With a loud scream, Kisame rose and charged at Naruto, swinging his sword wildly. Naruto managed to block each swing with his own giant blade as Kisame seemed slower than before. His face was pale, extremely so, and each swing seemed weaker than before. Blood oozed from his stump like a river and it probably wouldn't stop any time soon. Blocking a rather weak swing, Naruto pushed Kisame's sword aside and spun around to slice Kisame's head off his shoulders. And Kisame could do nothing to stop it. 4x. Jiraiya watched the scene unfolding with wide eyes, his battle with Itachi seemingly forgotten. He couldn't believe he would see that blade again or that Naruto could use it so easily. He also couldn't believe that Naruto had an S-rank Nukenin at his mercy. So lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice his opponent rushed towards his fallen teammate until it was too late. Itachi ran with all his might towards Naruto and Kisame. He appeared before them in an instant, brandishing a ninjutsu and using it to block Naruto's blade from decapitating his partner. No moves were wasted as he batted the larger blade aside and swung his ninjutsu towards Naruto. The blonde was completely and utterly unprepared for this interruption and he could do nothing as Itachi's ninjutsu sliced along the right side of his face. Naruto couldn't even scream in pain as he felt his eye being sliced as Itachi stabbed the ninjutsu straight through his chest. Naruto's mouth opened in a silent scream as he dropped to his knees with a sword sticking out of his chest. Itachi wasted no moment as he grabbed his partner's collar and jumped on a huge crow he summoned. Just in time as a chakra-coated fist slammed into the ground where he stood only a second ago. As the bird flew away, Itachi's Sharingan clearly saw enraged Tsunade glaring at him. As the two Akatsuki members vanished, Tsunade's rage turned into intense worry as she looked at the boy behind her. Naruto was pale and on the verge of unconsciousness as blood leaked from his chest. She could also see the damage on his face as well as his eye, but she couldn't do anything about it. She had to deal with the sword wound or he would die. And she would kill herself before she let that happen. She gently laid him on the ground and swiftly pulled out the sword from his chest. Her glowing hands immediately landed on the wound, beginning the difficult process of healing. She didn't even notice as Jiraiya and Shizune appeared by her side. The only thing on her mind was Naruto and his life that hanged on a thread.